So with all that's going on in the world, you might be inclined to think that House Republicans have finally abandoned their failed sham Biden impeachment inquiry. And yet the Grand Inquisitor of that particular witch hunt, Republican James Comer, went out on Newsmax and further disgraced himself in epic fashion. Here's a clip from that exchange.
Here's a $64,000 question. Chairman, when do we hold them accountable for perjury or evading taxes?
A lot evading taxes, many financial crimes. The reason that this is taking so long, in addition to the obstruction from the White House, is there's more evidence that comes in every day.
You see, they have too much evidence. That's really what's at stake here. It's not that they lack evidence, it's that they have too much. They don't even know what to do with it. So we're actually going to bring on a guest, a friend of the show, Luke Beasley, to help me break this down. What's up, Luke?
Josiah, it's great to be with you. As I was watching that, I was thinking about this CNN reporting that just recently came out that said James Comer has said to GOP colleagues he's hoping Jesus will come down to save him from this impeachment effort because he's now stuck. He doesn't want to get an impeachment vote because that would fail because they haven't actually uncovered anything. But he can't announce that it's over without pursuing an impeachment because that would be the admission of failure. So he wants Jesus to save him.
But Luke, apparently that was incomplete. I mean, we talked about that reporting too, and also other indicators that have been going on over the past several weeks that James Comer is really not happy about where this has gone, that his fellow Republicans are pretty upset with how he's managed this as well. He's confessed in private fundraising emails that he's leaning towards criminal referrals rather than an impeachment, et cetera and so forth. But what he really wants us to know, Luke, is what he needs Jesus for is to help him parse through all the abundant evidence against the Biden crime family. That's really what this is about, Luke. I mean, are you overwhelmed with all the evidence?
It's sort of like when you say to someone, if you're in an argument, you've done this thing so many times, and they go, name one time. And then you're like, there were so many times, but I can't name one. In his case, there's so much evidence. He can never seem to name a single bit of it. And even setting that aside, which we shouldn't, he can't seem to name what the crime would even be that they would be proving. And Jamie Raskin in a recent hearing said, okay, go ahead, name the crime for everybody. And James Comer, after months of investigating, said, you're about to find out.
Apparently, we're still waiting with bated breath. But I will say, because obviously we have clips to play throughout this discussion, we'll go ahead and tee another one up, which is James Comer trying to convey to Newsmax, which, as we know, is a very sympathetic network. They really want Comer to produce the goods on President Biden. This is what James Comer had to say. This is the new damning smoking gun evidence.
And what they were doing is trying to get money through Joe's connections in Qatar to save what was essentially a corrupt healthcare company that's currently under investigation for Medicaid fraud and other things. This same company employed several Biden family members and even contributed $200,000 to Joe Biden's personal bank account. So this is evidence of influence peddling. Qatar is a bad country that sponsors terrorism, yet Joe Biden has refused to name Qatar as a sponsor of terrorism. This is what we believe the Biden family's problem is. They've been influence peddling, and it has compromised Joe Biden.
So Luke, did you get that? So listen, this implicates, according to James Comer, if we take him at face value, this implicates Jim Biden and Hunter Biden. I mean, isn't that a done deal? Isn't that the final nail in the coffin for President Biden's credibility? If they've got dirt on people who are famously not President Biden?
And often during timelines when Biden wasn't powerful because he wasn't in a position of power. But also, I don't even know, there used to be a world where once something was fact-checked, once it was revealed that something wasn't really a bombshell, then even dishonest actors would feel less compelled to bring that thing up. So here you heard him reference the $200,000 go into Joe Biden's bank account. What he's talking about is a loan repayment. So Biden quite literally couldn't have profited off of it because it was a no interest loan that he gave to his brother and then got paid back for it. And that's referenced again. And sometimes, obviously, how could I possibly not be happy right now as I'm collabing with you, Josiah? But in other moments, I'll find myself really upset even having to discuss some of this because it reminds me in since we're sort of speaking out into an abyss, because we can fact check this hundreds of times, and a bunch of good journalists doing good work out there can go uncover the information that debunks what Republicans are saying, and they can still push it. And that's not the bad part. It's that they can push it effectively. And I just watched a clip of a sort of independent voter saying, I would vote for Biden, but I just think he's corrupt because of this stuff. They've successfully pushed these baseless narratives about Joe Biden. And while a lot of people understand, I know they don't have a smoking gun necessarily, but there's a lot of smoke, so there must be fire. But they are the ones making the smoke.
Yeah, so all of that's very interesting. So a couple of things there that you've touched on. So number one, it is worth making fun of the what I call Republican math on this. So it's like Luke, you and I in this hypothetical, we're brothers, and I loan you $20, and if you pay me that $20 back, haven't I basically made $40? Isn't that how Republican math works? Like, I give you 20, you give me 20. That means at two different points in the timeline, I've had $20 in each hand. 20 and 20 make 40. I mean, it's obvious, Luke. Honestly, I think you're too biased in favor of President Biden. You just don't see the obvious mathematical implications here, right?
Right. It's a great point, I guess.
It's like, yeah, that is a sure.
It's similar to, you really get an alternate universe where not only can you believe 20 plus 20 minus 20 equals 40,
right,
but
exactly.
also that 2020 the year was like 3 years ago or something.
Right.
And that's why Trump's not to blame for any mishandling of the pandemic. Sorry, go ahead.
No. That's a phenomenal point, because that timeline issue is also present here. You touched on it earlier. It isn't just a math issue. It's also an inability to understand linear time. So, this article, this bombshell reporting that Comer's talking about, again, Jim and Hunter Biden, who are famously not Joe Biden, they are in fact three separate people, I have been led to believe. It also occurred in 2017 and 2018. So even if we take everything, literally we give them the benefit of the doubt, which obviously we're not obligated to do, as often as Comer has lied about this, Joe Biden wasn't vice president. He wasn't president. He wasn't even running for president. So what corrupt activities could Joe Biden have engaged in as a private citizen that would have been relevant to an impeachment? It makes no sense. So we have the math. It works against Republicans. We have the timeline, which works against Republicans. And also the standard. I also feel like this is worth pointing out. Why is it that Joe Biden as a private citizen, Hunter Biden as Joe Biden's son, Jim Biden as Joe Biden's brother, why are they held to a higher standard than Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump's daughter and son-in-law, who, by the way, were part of the Trump administration? And I'll actually throw this one out. More than Donald Trump himself, didn't Democrats release a report, which was, by the way, limited? They said it wasn't a full comprehensive report because when Comer and the Republicans took the majority in 2023, they shut the investigation down. But based on what Democrats were able to investigate, isn't it true that President Trump, then President Trump, received more than $5 million from an adversary in China? So why is it that they don't care what Donald Trump as the sitting president does and who he gets money directly from, even if it's a foreign adversary, but as private citizens, Joe, Jim, and Hunter Biden have to be held to an infinitely higher standard? Have you caught that?
Yeah, so it's sort of, I say to my audience a lot, we don't have to compare to debunk what they're saying about Biden, right? We don't have to throw in Trump even yet to understand the absurdity of what they say about President Joe Biden. By itself, we can just focus on the allegations against President Joe Biden and understand them to be ridiculous. And right now, James Comer, after all of these investigations, has revealed nothing that's anywhere close to a crime, obviously, nothing that's even wrongdoing on the part of President Joe Biden when it comes to these statements. Okay, so once we've thoroughly done that for what it is, then you compare it to Trump. And to your point, one of the things that bothers me a lot about these discussions is, and they almost get away with this even on mainstream networks when James Comer will go, rarely on networks other than Fox News and Newsmax, they'll word it as if the family of Biden has been getting money from governments in foreign countries. And so they'll say he got this much from China or this much from Ukraine, when in reality, they're just talking about business deals that were done in those countries, not with those countries' governments. And then you look at Trump, who actually was getting money from the governments themselves, in addition to businesses in those countries.
While he himself was in government.
President.
Right.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And this is why I'm super supportive of the news we got yesterday, which is that Hunter Biden is bringing a lawsuit against Fox News for a bunch of things, including the strewing about of his nude photos without his consent, but also making a lot of these now debunked claims.
No, yeah, listen, I love the fact that Hunter Biden is finally bringing the fire back. I mean, we've seen a bit from that too, like with his, with how he also turned the Biden impeachment effort into theater. And he, by the way, he had every right to. And you actually introduced me to a clip that we're going to play here in a second, where we actually have House Democrats acknowledging that that's part of the strategy, treating this exactly how it should be treated, exactly for what it is. I do want to play that clip. But something else that you mentioned too, which was the double standard is the double standard that is imposed by Republicans on the rest of the country has not been without consequence. Like I mentioned this in my videos, this impeachment effort against President Biden has always lacked widespread popular support. I want to be clear about this. They have failed spectacularly to accrue the interest that they need to justify it and the support from the public. Okay, so for comparison, both of then President Trump's impeachments was much more paid attention to, like more people paid attention to both of those impeachment efforts and supported those impeachment efforts, which of course ultimately failed because of cowardly Republicans. So this impeachment effort by Republicans, and it's been the one major political initiative they've consistently engaged in since they took the majority in the House of Representatives, it's been an abject failure on the merits and what they need it to do. However, to your point, the idea that President Biden is corrupt, that has, taken root with a large number of Americans. Now, more people say that Donald Trump is corrupt. Thank God, because obviously he objectively is. I'm glad that the American people recognize that. But the number of people who think that President Biden is corrupt as a result from this relentless PR campaign by Republicans against the president, which is effectively what this impeachment effort has been, it's closed the gap. More people still think Trump is corrupt, but if you look at the polls, a disturbing number of Americans, as a result of this impeachment effort, think Biden is corrupt. But then if you ask them about it, they point to debunked talking points from the GOP, which is, there's that quote that's attributed to Mark Twain that, a lie travels around the world twice in the time it takes for the truth to lace up its boots. They are, so I guess my point is, I just want to acknowledge, I think you nailed a really good point here, which is, Republicans lose the argument on the merits, yes. They probably don't have the votes for impeachment. That's almost certainly true. If they did have the votes for impeachment, it would die an ugly death in the Senate. So they failed in their grand ambitions. But in terms of clouding the waters, like muddying the waters, they have been more successful than the facts justify. Do you think that's fair to say?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So I want to play this clip that Luke actually found for me, and again, I love it. It's just an outright admission by House Democrats that they recognize this for what it is, and it has impacted their strategy accordingly.
What ultimately stops the wild, crazy disinformation on the right? And at some point, I think shame and humiliation has to come in as a tactic, because to treat it as an equitable argument against an argument that Democrats are making, one, I think is the wrong way to treat it, but it plays to a tie when it shouldn't. I think what you engage in that hearing room is critically important for the American people to see.
Yeah, well, first let me give credit to Jamie Raskin, who is going to be the next chairman of Oversight, and Maxwell Frost, Jasmine Crockett, Robert Garcia. I mean, there's just a whole team, Dan Goldman. There's been a whole team effort. And I think Hakeem Jeffries, Leader Jeffries, figured out that they were putting together this TV committee, right, in which they were going to try to sell this to the American people. And we realized, listen, we can come up there, we can try to be as professional as we can with logic and reason, but if they're going to make this into a show, we have to participate in that. And I think we've done that, right? It turns out, in order to impeach a president, you have to have evidence. Who knew, right? And so they've had none. Right. And I think we got to the point where it was super clear that they were running out of room And I think Democrats, we took advantage of it. I knew when I called for that vote, I knew Comer would look at me like a deer in the headlights. It turns out maybe Republicans shouldn't pick their chairman based on how much money they raise. They should pick their chairman based on ability. So,
So, Luke, I know we could talk about this like ad nauseum because this is stuff that we're happy about. I love this clip. I'm glad you introduced it to me. What do you think we finally have an outright acknowledgement that House Democrats have finally learned how to play the game from House Republicans?
Yeah, you and I have talked about this since we met. Democrats need to be willing to play the game a little bit more. If they're going to do ridiculous hearings, be ridiculous, accurate, factual, but sort of bombastic, and also get your own viral clips from those moments. Then, once you can successfully laugh them out of the room and you have power again, then get back to work seriously. But as long as they have the majority in the House, then yes, turn these hearings into ridiculous jokes, which is what the Jared Moskowitz is by calling out people like James Comer, the Jamie Raskins, Dan Goldmans, Jasmine Crockett's, etc. have been doing and has been successful. And I think it's why James Comer is terrified to hold more hearings and is hoping, according to this reporting, that Jesus will come down to save him.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm glad that we're finally getting an acknowledgement of it. I think that they should run with this. This is something I said in my recent interview with Dan Goldman as well. It'd be one thing if House Democrats were in the majority, if they wielded the power, if they had the ability to set the agenda with legislation, and they were choosing to engage in stunts instead, but that's not the case. House Republicans, with all their disarray, they're the ones who set the agenda. Democrats can't bring things to the floor of the House of Representatives without Speaker Johnson and Republicans backing it. So they are making the best use of their time, effort, and energy by far. And I think, I'm hopeful, and I'm a cynic by nature, so this is saying something, that it will pay dividends in the upcoming election. Luke, where can people find you?
You can find me at Luke Beasley on YouTube, and it's always an absolute delight with you, Josiah.
Likewise, Luke, go check him out.